Harry, you're going to hit 45 million bottles a year. You're in 18 countries. How is VITHIT achieving all this success with just 30 employees?
The company was definitely insolvent. I sat down with an accountant, and she just basically told me, look, your business is insolvent. I've seen 23 businesses in this position. I've rescued one of them, and you're going to be the second one. And my biggest mistake, and I always say this, is you got to get out and sell it yourself. So I was a bit of I always say I had a Southside Dublin disease called laziness. So I did all the fun stuff. I created the product, and then sat in my ass and expected someone else to sell it. And it failed.
What was the one thing during the really tough times, losing the car, losing the house, what was the one thing that convinced you to keep going with this?
In Ireland, for instance, we're the 7th best-selling drink of any kind. So in Ireland, we outsell Evian, Volvic, Innocent, Diet Coke, any Sprite, 7-Up, Fanta. We outsell them all. We're the only non-major brand, so that isn't owned by Coca-Cola, Britvic or Suntory or whatever. We're the only ones that are making money and that are actually self-sufficient. We're 100% still privately owned after 25 years.
So Gary, how's the EY Entrepreneur of the Year? You're in the running. How's that going?
It's great. And it's funny, people have asked me, would it be great if you win it? Honestly, hand on my heart, I don't care if I win or not, because it's the age-old thing. It's taking part that counts, but it actually is. It was brilliant. We had a trip to Japan. We went there for 6 days, which was like a boot camp. It was really hard. Like I had one of those Whoop things on my wrist, and I averaged 4 hours sleep a night. So it was a killer, but really enjoyable. Got a great bunch of people that we were hanging out with, and the amazing thing is that there was 120 or 130 people on it, so like about 100 alumni who go back every year. So they're going back for a reason, because it's actually really enjoyable. And what I realized is that I'm a very small fish in a small pond, in a large pond. Because, I would think, I'm doing great, selling X amount of million bottles or whatever, but you're sitting there beside guys that are turning over 500-700 million euros on the back of a bus, just chatting about life. And it really kind of opened my eyes. So it's been really beneficial. And I'm a cult member now. I'll be going every year.
Great. What was some of the biggest lesson? What was the biggest lesson you learned from that trip?
Biggest lesson? Well, it's probably what I just mentioned, that, I'm kind of in my own little fishbowl. So day to day, I'm just thinking drinks. We're leading in Ireland, we're leading in the UK, we're leading in a couple of other European countries, and I'm in my own little lane, and I just stay there. And actually, I'm not one for networking. I don't traditionally go out and network to try and meet people for any particular reason. So this kind of forced me into a, not uncomfortable, but a different place that I don't normally go to. So you're learning about other people's businesses. So it just opened my eyes that, I'm not the only show in town. There's a lot of ways to make money. And this guy's selling like doors coming from China and turning over like 60 million and stuff, like mad stuff. There's one guy who's doing children's school meals, and they're turning over like well in excess of 200 million doing school meals. I think like it's mad. Like there's some incredible businesses that you just wouldn't do. And then there's loads of tech and stuff like that, which is completely beyond my brain capacity. So I'm a guy who creates something and sells it, but there's just multitude of businesses. So it was just really interesting, really interesting. If you're interested in business at all, and it was something that I was like, do I really want to go on a trip and take a week out of my life for Japan? And then there's 3 commitments, and I live in Dubai, so I had to fly back to Ireland twice already, and I'm going back again in November. But it was something that I just committed to, and I'm really glad I did.
We might have to get some of those interesting companies onto the podcast.
Yeah, I'll give you an if this goes well. If I don't ask any really bad questions.
So, Gary, just briefly, before we get into VITHIT, what were you up to before you started VITHIT?
Well, I've been doing this a long time, so I wasn't up to a lot. I was failing at lots of different things. So I started VITHIT 25 years ago. And that would probably surprise you guys and everybody else listening, because people have only really heard about VITHIT the last 10 years. But I was doing a lot of work in the background, failing, changing brand name, getting it to where it is today. Before that, so I was a professional rugby player for a very short time, from 95 to 96-ish. So the first year of professionalism, and got injured. Happiest injury of my life, because I was kind of a journeyman. I was never going to be a Brian O'Driscoll. I was a centre. Thought I was fantastic, which I think you need to be if you're in sports and saying in business. You got to think above your station. And I've always been very optimistic, which I think is important for entrepreneurship. But I was rolling away at being a rugby player, that crashed and burned. I got an injury, and that was the end of that. So it kind of forced me. But I was always buying and selling stuff, because at the time we were playing rugby in the amateur era. And then when it went professional, suddenly you were getting nice pocket money for something that you would always have done for free. So I felt like a bit of a loser playing rugby and not doing anything else. So I was doing businesses on the side. So that consisted of I started up a vitamin business. Was selling it to Boots in the UK. I was selling proteins. I was the first guy to bring creatine into Europe. I brought it in back in 1991, or I think, or 1992, and was selling it to the Irish rugby team for performance-based things. I was also selling it into. So when I moved to the UK to play rugby, in there, I think they were 95, 96, I was selling it to all the local rugby teams. But how I ended up in the drinks business was men didn't spend money on themselves. It wasn't like they do today. Like, it was very hard to get, like, I don't know, 25 quid for a tub of creatine out of your average professional rugby player, because they just didn't spend money on themselves.
How were you kind of ahead of the trend with the, obviously you said you're selling vitamins and creatine, were you always just kind of into your fitness and into your health, or how did that come around?
I think primarily I was always into business. I never wanted to work for anybody. I was one of those young kids who would buy loads of business books. The only things I ever read were business books. I never read any novels. I did, but not many. And now I'm purely a podcast guy. But I was really just searching for what my business would be. I was going to franchise shows in New York. I was trying to find out what business I could get into. And it was almost desperation. I was in my mind, because I wasn't good at the national quiz. I was, just about got enough points in the Leaving Cert to get to college, and never bothered to go. And because I just knew that academics were not my route. So it was always constant, there was always something scratching in the back of my mind saying, I've got to get into my own business, got to get into my own business. And because I was playing rugby, that was kind of a healthy thing to do. And I knew a little bit about nutrition. So that's kind of where that just led into each other and became, what ended up being VITHIT.
And then, Gary, so if we get on to VITHIT, then could we maybe go through your journey with VITHIT and say you started, 25 years ago? Could we go through that maybe in 5-year blocks, if that's possible?
I've got a terrible memory, but I can give it to you. The grades, of where it went. So the first 5 years, let's say when I started the company, I thought I'd be a millionaire within a year. So again, optimism is a great thing, but had someone had told me it'd take you 12 or 15 years to break even, I wouldn't have done it. But in my mind, I could have achieved anything, so out I went. And so basically, if you take it right back to the start, I could see people drinking sugary sports drinks. I knew sugary sports drinks were really bad for you, so I thought there must be another way. I was buying and selling. I created my own vitamin brand, which is called VITZ, V-I-T-Z, and another one called Life's a Peach. So I was creating vitamins for women, and I just wasn't really into the business. I didn't have a passion for it, because I never liked taking vitamins myself. So around 1998, I made a decision that I was going to put vitamins into drinks. And it took 2 years before I actually set up the company, which was in 2000, which was 25 years ago, a long, long time. But what I did was, I decided that I wanted to put vitamins into drinks, and I didn't know how to do it because the internet wasn't readily available. It was available, but it just wasn't like you couldn't put in ChatGPT, give me 20 manufacturers in Europe who produce low-calorie vitamin drinks, and then they all pop up and you go see them or you talk to them. This was phone calls and driving around the country. So I drove down to Limerick. I met with a producer down there, and he said, look, we can't put vitamins into drinks, but there's a German company who can, and then we'll fill them for you. So I flew to Germany, met with these guys, and put it together. So then I had production. I was buying and selling the odd apartment. So I had some money. Don't mind telling you, but I think it was about 90,000 euros to start. So I think it was about 50,000 euros to get my first bit of stock. And then labeling and bottles and all that kind of stuff. So I had enough money to start from selling an apartment. Then
have that belief to give to invest half your money that you own.
Well, it was all the money that I owned, yeah, because so that the first bit went in, but for cash flow, I knew it would be all. Yeah, I suppose that's an interesting point, but there was no chance this wasn't working. In my head, it was. And if you talk to any entrepreneur, what was the sense of failure? There was none. Like, if you're starting a business, you've got to believe that everybody's going to want a low-calorie vitamin drink, which was, today it seems normal. But back then, it was an unusual thing to do, to create. So, so I started producing that. And I remember I borrowed space in the back of a friend's warehouse. And there was like maybe 30 pallets full of drinks. And I was looking at it going, right now I got to sell it. I had a distributor, put it in the back of his truck. And my biggest mistake, and I always say this to anybody who's in FMCG, which is a fast moving consumer goods, chocolate, shampoo, whatever, is you got to get out and sell it yourself. So I was a bit of I always say I had a Southside Dublin disease called laziness. So I did all the fun stuff. I created the product and then sat on my ass and expected someone else to sell it. And it failed. Now the product wasn't quite right. It was the same product that's in the bottles today, but the bottles were wrong. The brand name was wrong. The branding was wrong. There was lots of things that I was getting wrong, but I was kind of making little failures along the way and losing money and running out of money and kind of panicking and trying to change branding and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose that was probably in your 5-year blocks. That was probably from the year dot to, let's say, from 2000 to 2007. I was just making mistakes. And then in 2008, I changed the brand name to VITHIT because I was just losing money the whole time. Now, I was still buying and selling the odd apartment, but as you probably remember, well, you won't remember because you're so young, but there was a financial crash in 2007, 2008. So you could no longer buy and sell apartments. So I could no longer fund the business. So then I had a decision to make. I was either going to keep trying to trade apartments, which were going down, which was clearly that wasn't going to work, or I'd just have to focus completely on the business that I would hope to rescue, which was VITHIT. And that was where things started to change. The company was definitely insolvent. I sat down with an accountant and she just basically told me, look, your business is insolvent. I've seen 23 businesses in this position. I've rescued one of them. And you're going to be the second one. But she said, you need to fire everybody. I had 3 sales reps. She said, you need to get rid of everybody. And around that time, my house got repossessed and my car got repossessed as well. So I basically had no car, but I took the car from the sales rep that I had let go and I got in that car. And I needed desperation. Like I had a kind of a soft landing upbringing, middle class Dublin, playing rugby, the type. And everything came easy for me. And so I think I needed to learn a bit of hardship in order to get up off my sorry ass and go around and do something about it. And it ended up being a really fun time. Obviously, pre to that, so when you're losing money from 7 or 8 years, the bills are coming to the door, you're losing your house, there's a lot of stress. So when all that went, I was just focused on business. One thing had to work for me, and it was getting in a car, selling the product from door to door, and I sold it into 3,500 stores around Ireland in that car that was marked up VITHIT. I drove around and I'd go into the store owners, and I ended up creating something that I ended up being a salesperson. I never was before. I really enjoyed selling. And before that, I was just kind of like, oh, I don't really want to hustle the owner of the store. And and I find everybody who's in my position now, people who take my advice all the time, I always say to them, get up off your ass, go to the store. No business will survive unless you're selling. If you're not selling, you're failing. So you can have you can have all the accountants in the world and all the social media people, but if you're not selling and actually bringing in revenue, your business is dead. So I realized that and got out and, I haven't looked back since.
Revenue is definitely the first piece of the puzzle. Gary, can we go back to the branding? How important was getting that branding right for VITHIT's success?
Yeah, that and sales were everything. So I always say, if you have a product, it's got to look great, taste great, and be great. So the product didn't look great. So it doesn't matter how great the product is because it's the same product, VITHIT. That was the 2 flavors that are the same, that were the same back in 1998 when I was creating it, when I registered the company back in 2000. So I knew the flavors were good, but the packaging was just awful. It was everything. There's no way I'd be sitting here today if I still had the same ugly bottles. It was called VIT, the ITZ, which I thought meant vitamins, but I found out that people thought it meant, they thought it was a German brand, Weitz. So branding for me was absolutely everything, because if you don't have any money to advertise, that's your advertising block on a shelf. So if you're walking by and some consumers looking at Coca-Cola, Powerade, Lucozade, and they see your product, if it doesn't grab them straight away, you're gone. And even to this day, when we go into new markets in Australia or in France or wherever, you've just got to get them in 0.3 of a second. So your product has to look healthy and look clean. In my business. So it didn't look healthy, it didn't look clean. I was very confused. So the products basically said VITs, and then it said low calorie, low sugar, vitamins, 100% RDA, What else did it say? Tasty flavors, blah, blah, blah. I had like 10 or 12 messages. It was just a mess. And one of the first things that when I went to a designer, he said, look, you just got to take everything away and then just place back, your primary message, your secondary message, and your tertiary message. And that's it. And that's really where we scraped everything away. And I went to a designer, a guy called Dave Fitz, and I went in with the old bottle and I said, look, this is what it was. Get rid of that. Here's a new bottle. You can do whatever you want. But I said, the brand is called VITHIT. So I think there might be some sort of a target in there. But other than that, you can do what you want. And I went back then about a week later and he had a blackboard and he had 6 designs on the product. He had labels planted. I looked at them and I said, I'm sorry, it doesn't look like it's going to work. They just don't look good. And I went back to the car and I took out a bottle and I filled it from one of my crappy bottles into the new bottle. And I went up with a blank bottle. I said, look, let me just rip those labels off and stick them on. And I ripped it off and I stuck it on. I was like, Jesus, I nearly missed it. This is perfect. Let's run with this. And we went for 5 flavors. And from that point onwards, sales, as soon as we produced that bottle, sales went up over 100% overnight. It was just a complete difference because suddenly you have this skinny, ugly bottle which has loads of messages, says VITS, to a lovely, clean bottle in white mouth, which is still the bottle that we use today. White background, Target, VITHIT, and just really natural looking product. And that was just a catalyst it was a base from which everything could grow, because there was no way we could have grown off the back of, no matter how good the product tastes, there was no way I could get people to take the product off the shelf. And as soon as that happened, I started seeing the product coming off the shelf before my eyes, and that was where things started to change. And from that point onwards, so that was, let's say, to get back to your 5 year. So from my story earlier, getting up to about 2008, we changed the products around then. And then about 2 years later, when we were selling really well, that was when a large Irish distributor approached me and said, look, we'd really like to take your products on. And we went from 3,000 cases a month to 30,000 cases a month in 1 month. So basically, the product then was working, but my distribution model wasn't working. So I could see in my store that we were selling a lot of products, but it just wasn't in enough stores. And then the new distributor took it on and things just went. And then that enabled me to bring it to other.
And the importance of brand is very much at the heart of the services of TAP Design Consultancy, our sponsors of the podcast.
TAP for over 10 years has been helping to shape and define brands and how they turn up in the market. Whether it's within healthcare, hospitality, workplace or retail, the strength of brand is always the focal point of connecting with customers.
And it's through the sponsorship of TAP Design Consultancy, we can explore fantastic conversations such as these. And if you're building a brand and want to shape meaningful customer experiences, then visit www.wearetap.ie or email hello@wearetap.ie for more information and start your brand journey today.
Now, let's get back to our conversation.
When you look at that, like, I know you obviously got, I wouldn't say maybe not quite overnight success in those couple of years there, but what was the one thing during the really tough times, losing the car, losing the house, what was the one thing that convinced you to keep going with this?
I think you have to have an unbelievable amount of self-belief. So it was just self-belief. And it was not so much self-belief, but it was also, I always had belief in my own abilities, but I knew that this product was better than any of the crap was on the shelf. And I just had to get other people to try it. And then they'd realize, well, what's the point in drinking sugary crap if I can taste something that tastes just as good as the sugary crap, but is actually so much better for you and gives you so many more health benefits. So I knew in my heart of hearts, nobody was going to tell me, put a gun to my head, do you 100% believe that VITHIT is better than sugary drinks? Absolutely. So I knew this. I just had to get people to try and educate people. So that was the one thing that kept me going. I always thought that one day people would finally get it. Now, saying that, if I was to look back into it's all great fun now, but when I look at my deepest, darkest days and my house is being repossessed and my car is being repossessed, had someone given me an out. There was a couple of times, for maybe a 6-month period that was really dark, that I'd wake up in the morning and the nightmare would start again, and I'd try and open the door and it'd be blocked with solicitors' letters, and it was just a mess. And had someone just reached out then and either gone, look, I'll buy 50% of the company from you for some crappy price that'll get you out of a hole, I would have taken their arm. Or had someone gone, listen, do you just want a job? It would have been hell for me, but I probably would have taken it. There was a 6-month kind of a dark period in there. But there was no one reaching out. And it's one of the problems now I see with companies that are starting. Like, we're the only non-major brand, so that isn't owned by Coca-Cola, Britvic, or Suntory or whatever. We're the only ones that are making money and that are actually self-sufficient. We're 100% still privately owned after 25 years. So how I equate that is, there's young people out there now saying, oh, I really want to start a health drink. They'll create a health drink, of which there's lots of them now. And they'll say, okay, we'll go for funding. They'll give away 25% of the company. There's no pressure. There's nobody turning around to you like my accountant said to me, your company's insolvent. You should get your ass out into your car and go do it, because there wasn't that pressure. So they then go get, oh, running out of money. Sure, we'll just raise another round. And then they give away another 20%. Suddenly there's two guys. They've lost 45% of the company. They're going to split the other 55. So they're getting close to losing majority. Then they run out of money again. This happens all the time. They end up with 30% of the company. Motivation's gone. They give up and get a real job. So I didn't have any of those options, thankfully, because I definitely wouldn't have 100% of the company. And the other thing I think, which is really important, is luck. So I'm not saying I was before my time, but the brand was ahead of where the Irish health market was. So nobody in Ireland was into health. There was like 5 gyms in the whole of Dublin, let's say, back in the early 2000s. So, while I was toiling away and getting my product right, customers really didn't want it back then, because there was no need for health. There was no want for health. And then I remember when the recession came in 2007, I remember the Ray D'Arcy show, and he was talking about depression and people were in a terrible way. And he was basically saying, look, if you want to, because people have lost their jobs and people have lost money, and it was an awful time. But I remember there was a big thing about just buy a pair of runners or use your runners and go out and run. It's great for you. It releases endorphins and whatever. And suddenly the country really copped on to health, and health just became this big thing, and people started giving up their jobs and became personal trainers and all that kind of stuff. So that wave of health met me in about 2008 when I got the brand right. So, anybody who tells you that they're a complete genius in business is probably lying. A bit of luck is always good too.
Thanks, Gary. That was really interesting. The whole funding side, that you didn't get that funding, so it really forced you to make profit.
Yeah.
What advice would you have then for young entrepreneurs in a similar situation? Should they try and hit profit first before taking on funding, or how do you get that balance right?
Well, it's a really different business model, because you're going to have to get money from somewhere. So, you might get your first production run, but you're going to have to get money from somewhere. So I would be saying friends and family. Friends and family definitely helped me out and kept the company alive back in the day. And I would say to them that you really have to be on your last legs. And people think their last legs are, oh, look, we can't make wages this month. We're just going to have to go fund. I would say we can't make wages this month. Get in your car. If there's 2 of you, there usually is in these businesses, get in your car and just go sell it into like 300 stores. You'll probably make wages if you sell into 300 stores. If you have 2 guys calling into 150 stores each, you can get 15 stores a day. You'll make it in 20 days. So they just give up without that option, right? So, and I would have done that as well had I been in that situation. So if you're in my business, FMCG, I always give advice to young people in this situation anyway. Like, there was these guys who came to me about 2 years ago, remain unnamed, their brand is doing quite well now. And they said, oh, we're raising money. And I said, oh, how much is your company worth? And they said, oh, we valued it at 800 grand. I said, okay, how many stores are you in? They're in 200 stores. And I said, okay, well, what would get your company worth 2 million? And they said, oh, maybe 600 or 800 stores. I said, well, just go get them. Like, what are you doing giving away your equity without getting your ass in a car and driving for 3 or 4 months and getting it into all the stores you can, and then going back and saying the price is different? We're giving away a lot less. And I don't know exactly. I think they didn't do it, but their product is still successful. They probably gave away more than they should have at the time. So where you think your edge of the cliff is, it's always a bit further. You can always go a little bit further, push the cliff out a bit further. So I'd just be really loath to raise money as you are actually on your last legs, unless you've actually got in your car and sold it and broke your ass and haven't had sleep and stayed in B&Bs across the country. Until that you do that, then you're not in your last legs.
And then if we look forward then, so after those really difficult times, the next kind of 5-year batch, obviously things got a lot better after that, but if you go into detail about that then.
Yeah, so then once we were making profit, it was like a game of risk. You put a stake in the ground and you move on to another country. So I moved to the UK. The UK is a really, really tough battleground. I mean, my God, it's Unlike Ireland, in the UK, if you're the best-selling product in your category in Ireland, you'll get on the shelf. If you're in the best-selling category in Ireland, in the UK, you don't get on the shelf. There's lots of different things that need to go on for you to actually get on the shelf. It's a really complex, really nuanced market over there. So I moved over there in 2010 stroke 2011. And, I could fund it then because we were making money in Ireland. So I could fund it to go to the UK. So I remember the apartment was really small, but it was kind of almost like a war room. Like it was the apartment. Now it was in a lovely area. It was in Notting Hill, so don't feel too bad for me. But I was in, it was, gosh, I'd say the apartment was like 450 square feet. It was a one bed. And I had a small sitting room, kitchenette, and a desk. And the desk was both my dining room table and my office desk. And I just sit there every day and phone the likes of Boots and WH Smith and Tesco and Sainsbury's and Waitrose. And I just phoning them all and, not get through the right person and just keep going. And eventually I got onto Boots. And I don't know how, but they had actually seen the product. The buyer was a triathlete. And she was like, I'd really like to get low products in here. So I sat down with her, showed her our performance, and she was like, this is going to fly. And she stuck it on the shelves. It was a brave move because no other retailers had really taken it on in the UK. And once she had taken it on, again, you stick your flag in the ground. So now you have a rate of sale in the UK, because at that stage I was saying, look, we're doing really well in Tesco in Ireland, we're doing really well in Dunn Stores in Ireland, we're doing well in Super Value in Ireland, Central, blah, blah, blah. But in the UK, they didn't really care, even though we were doing well in Tesco. So you've got to have a retailer in the UK. So once I had Boots, then I went off to Tesco, Sainsbury's, blah, 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 and then it kind of spins out from that. Now, we're still only in about 10,000 stores in the UK, which sounds like a lot, but there's 80,000 stores in the UK and really 45,000 stores that you want to be in. So even though we are the best-selling health drink in the UK, the best-selling functional drink in the UK, we're driving the category, and we're now finally in pretty much all the retailers. We're still only in, let's say, 25% of those retailers. So let's say Sainsbury's, for instance, might have 3,000 stores. We're probably in, I don't know, maybe 700 of them, or 1,000 of them, that kind of stuff. So we still have loads. We still have loads of room to grow. Well, we don't have the massive budgets of all the big companies. Like, you're dealing with multi-billion-dollar deals from these massive companies. So if these massive companies are coming in, they're saying, look, we're selling Coca-Cola and we're bringing in a new range. We're doing a 1.5 billion with you this year, and we'd like you to take on this range. The retailer's not going to say no. Even if the range is absolutely crap and sells a third of what we sell, the retailer's going to be like, oh, we have a great relationship. We make a lot of money from you. So let's take this new product. So that holds innovation back. Now, lately, this week, we just got listed with Waitrose, which is the last the retailers to take us on. And they've just taken on a functional shelf. So there's ourselves and a couple of other vitamin drink, not vitamin drink companies, but functional companies. So there's a functional energy, there's also the vitamin drink, there's a kombucha in there. And so they're now creating a functional range, which is, I think, the first retailer in the country that actually is making a pure functional play. Tesco are actually doing it as well for us. So there's two retailers now who are doing it. And they're looking into the future. They're looking, if you want to see the future in my business, just go to America. And, you walk around there and everything is functional. They have massive functional bays of better for you drinks. Whereas here in Ireland and in the UK, it's probably, say, 80% non-functional, and that'll change. Literally over years, it's just going to go from this sugar's going to be, it's the burning platform. So, and we're going to go from, let's say VITHIT on the shelf to another 10 products on the shelf. So it's really growing, which is great for us, because it just means that more and more people are getting into functional drinks. Like, why would you drink sugar when you don't have to? If you have a really tasty drink that's going to be good for you, so sugar is on its way out.
When you say there that you're in, say, whatever it was, 700 Sainsbury's stores or whatever, out of 3,000, how does that work? So when you get Sainsbury initially, they don't just put it straight away in all the stores, is it? You have to work. So you have to work on trying to get into all those stores.
Like at the moment, we're on a trial in Tesco. We're in 150 stores in Tesco. And if that works, hopefully they'll come back and put you into 500, 400, I'm not sure. And that's how it works. With Sainsbury's, they took us straight into about 500, 600. And it was amazing. Sainsbury's is really unusual. They put one of our flavors in about 500 stores, and within a month it sold so well that they doubled up the amount of products. So they took another product and they added another 30% on. So we ended, or 40%, I think we ended up in like 700 stores for 2 flavors within a month of being on the shelf because we were selling so well. And that's the thing with VITHIT, is that it's one of those products that you stick it on the shelf and the rate of sale is really high. So it'll, like in Ireland, for instance, we're the 7th best selling drink of any kind. So in Ireland, we outsell Evian, Volvic, Innocent, Diet Coke, and Sprite, 7-Up, Fanta. We outsell them all because we've got to that stage. You know, all of those years of working in Ireland, it's come over to the other side and say major brand in Ireland. We want to be that major brand in the UK, and we'll get there.
I'd say that's some feeling when you look back all those years ago and like the car is gone, the house is gone, and how you're like, Jesus, that's in Ireland we're selling more like than Diet Coke, like that's.
Yeah, no, it is. It's brilliant. But because it happens gradually, you know, it's like saying, you know, when you've got a 25-year-old kid, God, he must have been a really cute 1-year-old. It's hard to remember, you know, because things change on a daily basis, and your expectations change. Wrongly, your expectations change. You know, I tried to celebrate the wins, you know, which is great. You know, if you'd have told me, whatever, even 10 years ago that we'd be selling 45 million bottles, I would have just been doing cartwheels. That's per year, by the way. But it doesn't happen from 0 to 45 million. It starts off as, you know, gosh, I think in our first year we sold like 25,000 bottles, like, you know, and then suddenly 10 years later you're on 1 million bottles. It takes so long to get to your first million, and then suddenly you go to 2 million, 12 million, 24, and it just goes up like that. Suddenly it starts a roller coaster. But yeah, it is something that I wish I got more pleasure out of the little wins. But you're always thinking, you know, the world's a big place. You're always thinking, we got to conquer the UK, you know, then we're going into France, got to conquer that. We're not in Germany yet. So you're always thinking of next stages. You never really sit back and look at the successes.
And Gary, can you give us a brief overview where you're at now with bottles sold, how many countries you're in, maybe compared to 10 years ago?
Yeah. Ooh, from 10 years ago. Gosh, I'm terrible with maths. That's why maths and accounting was my major failure. I would say, yeah, I mean, all our growth has happened. So if you go back 10 years, I'm just going to pick. So let's say we'll do 45 million bottles this year, and it probably goes down. I would say 10 years ago, we were probably only doing about maybe 3 or 4 million bottles. So exponentially, and compounding is an amazing thing. One thing I do understand is compounding, right? So, you know, and anyone out there, you know, in Ireland, we're not really great at buying stocks and shares. I'd be all about buying stocks and shares as soon as you can. You know, if you put something into the S&P now, €100 today, every month into the S&P, compounding, you know, it goes up 8% a year. So this year you're making 8% of 100 quid. Next year you're making 8% of 108 quid, and it just compounds and gets bigger and bigger. And that's what I've been doing in my business. You know, we're only growing at, so the last 5 years we've grown at 18% per year, and those 18% went back when we were tiny, mean absolutely nothing. But when you're now doing 45 million bottles, you're up 18% the next year. Suddenly it becomes a big figure. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's kind of the way I do it.
It definitely does.
I think actually in schools, they should have like a program where kids can put fake money into the S&P from an early age, and then every year they check, and then when they're in school for whatever 15 years, when they leave, they'll see that fake money would have been.
Definitely. I mean, it amazes me. Like, I listen to CNBC podcasts most mornings just to see what shares are doing and just to understand it. And when I first did it, whatever, 5 years ago, I didn't really understand any of the things they were talking about. But you suddenly, it's like listening to, I suppose, Spanish every day. You suddenly start to pick up some words, you know, because I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. But the whole thing of compounding and education for kids, like, you know, there's a couple of things I would change in the school system. Obesity is a huge problem. You know, definitely the S&P, to teach kids how to make money, how to get their money to make money. You know, you've got to understand that your money is disappearing at 3% a year. So you've got to make more than 3% to make it happen. So do you put all that money into the S&P? But for me, if I was to teach kids anything, it would take 10 minutes. I would just explain sugar and what sugar does to you. I will do this eventually. I would love to take trips into schools and just say, look, just give me 20 minutes. I'll give you a business chat. But actually the dangers of sugar and the reason for horrendous obesity, like something like 30% of obesity in our school systems at the moment. And it's just so unnecessary. It's in between meals. You know, when I was young, it'd be breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you wouldn't get anything in between. Now it's breakfast, loads of snacks, lunch, loads of snacks, dinner, loads of snacks. And then more snacks before you go to bed, right? So the sugar intake in kids now, kids can only take in 15 grams of sugar a day. Your average sports drink contains 42 grams of sugar. And as kids go around, you know those big 1 liter flavored milk drinks that they have in Ireland? They're something like 67 grams of sugar. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so that is like, if you want to know why obesity is a problem with your kid or a family member or whatever, just go straight for sugar and just count your sugars during the day, and you'll see, because the human body can't process any more than, as adults, 25 grams of sugar, and as kids, 15. And, you're giving your kids even a chocolate bar, it's got 30 grams of sugar in it. You can't have anything else for the rest of the day. So this is the problem. And I would love to just teach kids how to understand it, because companies will try and confuse you by packaging on the back and saying, oh, it's only got 10 grams of sugar per 100 grams, and then there's 500 grams in the bar or whatever. So that's just something that's really simple to teach, and I would love to teach that to kids.
And do you think there needs to come a stage where the Irish government or any government across the world, we need to get like a universal packaging where it becomes very easy for not only kids but for adults to see that this is what's in that, and that's obviously not good for you?
Yeah, I think for kind of snack sizes, they should be forced to say how much is in the actual pack. So if it's like a dairy milk, stop saying per portion. Per portion is 1 square. No one eats 1 square. I certainly don't. I'll whack the whole thing, right? Or, so certainly for snack sizes, I would be saying under certain grammage and under certain milliliters, I'd be saying exactly how much sugar is in the whole thing. And then when you're coming to cereals and stuff like that, you should say bowl size and say, bowl size, to make it really simple for people, because companies are just using science to baffle people, and things that look healthy are not necessarily healthy.
And so I think you're in 18 markets now, aren't you, across the world?
Mm-hmm.
And do you notice any big difference in health awareness across any of those markets, or is it all pretty similar?
Yeah, no, I think even though America started off with the obesity problem, and Europe has followed, I think there's a certain portion of things that happen in America happen first. So the sharp end of the tip, where all the fitness craze came from, and keto diets and low carbs, that all came from the States. So they understand things first when it comes to health. And then the UK is kind of second, and Ireland is kind of third. And then I suppose the rest of Europe comes after that. So it's very similar in our business. America was into health foods and health products and had health stores in the States, like big health stores, more so than the kind of beatnik ones we used to have in Ireland. So that all happened first. And then it kind of ping-ponged over to the UK and then into Ireland. And then, it kind of, France is pretty late, although France are coming along now. Spain is pretty late. Portugal is very late. So they're kind of picking up on that. I think that will change because of social media. I mean, there's a very small world now. So really fast, if there's a new health trend, it just ping-pongs across the world really faster. So I think that will change. But the one thing that I always did when I was younger and I wanted to start my own business is I would take a trip to the States. Now, obviously, you can go online now and take a small trip to the States and look at things. But I used to go there every year for about a week. So in my business, I would go to New York. I had cousins up in Long Island. I'd go to New York. I'd spend 2 nights in New York, obviously having a great time, really enjoying New York. But during the day, I would walk into health stores, into general stores, and kind of look at what's happening in the States. And I'm asking myself, would this kind of thing work in Ireland? And that was my thought process, kind of being inspired by different type of businesses, because there was no internet to go on to. I'm not quite sure how I would travel the world in my head today. I might be going online looking at products and that kind of stuff, which I do less and less now because I don't have that real need. But yeah, every year I would take at least a week and I'd go to New York, and I would just walk through the stores and kind of see, because that's kind of the area that I was interested in.
Right. Well, we have no excuse. We're in New York next week for a week. We're going to the Ryder Cup, so we have no excuse, Sean.
Great. You'll have to stay out of the pubs, lads.
Yeah. Yeah, and into the shop.
That's far.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll have a great time.
So,
Thank you, Portsmouth.
Gary, you're going to hit 45 million bottles a year. You're in 18 countries. How is VITHIT achieving all this success with just 30 employees?
We hired really well. We've got people who are really invested in the business. And I suppose you got to ask yourself, why did they stay? I think from day one, I had no interest in micromanaging people. and sitting on their shoulders and telling them what to do day to day. If they're good at their job, they'll go do it. So I suppose people in our business have a kind of an ownership of what they do. So if they succeed in their field, it's their win. It's not my win. So it's got to a stage now where I'm just the guy who created the brand. And if you asked me today to send 1 million bottles over to Spain in the next 2 months, I wouldn't know what to do, because I'm so disconnected from that part of the business now, because we've literally given ownership to a team of 3 or 4 people in logistics. There's 4 or 5 people in accounts. There's now a CEO, there's a head of international sales, head of the UK, head of UAE, and there's a head of Australia, and they all do their own job and own their own stuff. I suppose, so we look for kind of almost mini entrepreneurs, people who want to be involved in a business, but actually, no, in my eyes, I'd never liked someone, when you were doing something, someone come over and like, stop doing that, like if you're in a gym and you're lifting weights, someone goes, can I just go away, let me do my stuff, so I just think interrupting people and stopping them in their flow is it's a bad thing. People want independence, especially now. People want more and more independence in their work. So that's probably a bit of a key to it. I think the UK, Ireland, obviously, we have a really good distribution company. We've got really good salespeople on the ground in Ireland who kind of help out that distribution company. The UK has been a really big help to our journey. We tried to find a distributor in the UK. We couldn't, so we ended up doing it ourselves. So we've got a team of about 9 in the UK, and they're run by a really able-bodied guy who just hires really well. He's got a great team ethos there. They just moved into a new, I think they moved into a new office because I'd only seen it this summer. I went over to it and there's just a great vibe in the office. Everyone is young. Everyone is kind of enthusiastic. They're all out there and they're just kind of pushing towards the same goal. So, and I would have given Ryan, who's the MD of the UK, I would have given him total ownership of the UK many years ago, probably 11 years ago. I was in the UK and I'd got, I think, Boots and Sainsbury's, and he was working as a sales rep for Danone, and he had worked another job for about a year, and he just went around with me for a couple of months, and I literally just went, there's the keys of the city, go build VITHIT in the UK, and now he's probably one of the top drinks guys in the UK, and he's very well thought of in the industry now. So yeah, just gotta trust people, I think.
How do you get to that stage, or maybe that's just the personality, maybe, or how do you get to that stage where you're just willing to give that off to someone like in the UK? That's obviously a big operation over there. Where did that trust come from?
It's probably trust is outweighed by extreme laziness. I don't want to do it. So I'll just hand it over to someone else. I don't know. Yeah, it's partly that, it's partly I'm moving on. I'm going to go to another country and try and get it done somewhere else. I know that there are people who do most jobs better than I can. Like, I created a really nice brand and I'm pretty good at sales and I'm good at both those things, but I hire people who are much better at everything else than I am. So I think my biggest skill is knowing all my weaknesses. So and I embrace it. Like, I'm not ashamed that I'll give you a funny one. I was doing a mock leaving, so I was a 50-year maths exam. I got 9% in a maths exam, right? And it was a Christmas exam, and I was sitting there, how am I going to explain this to my dad? So I went home, and it was like, geography 72%, history 69%, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then it went maths 9. And my dad went, 9? What the hell is that? And I said, no, it's 9 out of 10. He went, oh, great, good man. So that was where my sales came in.
Yeah.
So,
Been on the ball.
but a lot of people would be ashamed of that. I'm just like, I'm no good at that, but I'm good at other things. I was good at sports, and I embraced that. So I think for any parents out there, like, your kids are not going to all be Harvard geniuses, but they might be really good at sports. They might be good at chess. They might be good at maths. They might be good at something. Who knows? But you got to embrace what people are good at and not be ashamed of the things you're bad at. I think when we were growing up, you were either good at sports or you're good at academics, and there was nothing in between. If you can't do one of those things, you're a loser. And it's probably the same things too in school, and that's wrong. So I was just like, yeah, I'm terrible at maths. Get used to it. I ended up passing my leaving cert. I don't know how. I must have got a teacher who was asleep at the wheel that day. But yeah, so back to the original question. It's all about recognizing your weaknesses, and I was kind of, I don't like the ego of I can do everything in a business, and I'm not a control freak. And I just wanted to set something up, grow in an area. And if I trust someone who's going to put his head down and get the job done better than I can, then why wouldn't you? So just step out of the way, get out of your own way, and go somewhere else and try and do this, recreate the same thing in other countries.
Brilliant. That's great advice. Thanks for sharing. How does the distributor? How does VITHIT work with distributors? That's something that from listening to previous podcasts I didn't quite. So, like you say,
Yeah. So
UK yourself, but Ireland you have distributors.
yeah. So if you take a distributor, so basically they're the wheels that are going into Dunn Stores, Tesco every day. So they're going in with Red Bull, vodka, whiskey, whatever they have. So they have these trucks. So it's costing them. If I was to have a truck to go in, it would cost me 500 quid for the day to send a truck in, and I'm only selling VITHIT. But if this guy's going in, he's selling VITHIT, Red Bull, and all this. So he's the distributor, he's the wheels. So I sell it to him. Let's say I make VITHIT for 50 cents. I'm selling it to him for 75 cents. He is delivering it. He's got a lot of overheads that I don't have. I don't have those sales reps that have to go into store. I don't have to for trucks. I don't have to pay for petrol. I don't have to get into any logistics and all of that stuff. I just basically get my stock to his warehouse. He puts it on his vans, gets it into the store, sells it in for 75 cents. The store will sell it on for whatever, €2 or whatever. So that's pretty much the way it is. It's much easier because your distributors in all these countries are constantly calling into, let's say, France. My distributors are calling into Carrefour every day. If I want to go to France, for me to get to a Carrefour buyer is almost impossible. I have to go to trade shows. I have to find the guys. I have to rugby tackle them when they go and buy and say, please try my product, all that kind of stuff. It's very hard. It's a hard graft. So you need the top distributors who are in there having these conversations with these guys every day. So preferably someone who's doing, I don't know, distributing Gatorade or Coca-Cola or a Red Bull or something, but they're in there and they're highly thought of. And then you give them a VITHIT and they go in and they say, have you seen VITHIT? This is a great product. So that's where that really helps. You make less margin by going through a distributor, but you don't have to hire all those people to get that job done. So our business model is create a nice brand, make the product really great, taste great, look great, all that kind of stuff. Help in the background with marketing, sell the product to a distributor gets it into stores, and then we'll market it from the top and get people into the stores to take it off the shelves.
So Gary, you've obviously said that there's loads of obviously healthy brands in your space at the moment. What sort of changes have you made to VITHIT's offerings? I know you've introduced a couple of new brands with VITHIT. Could you maybe talk a bit about them?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it, right? So you'll notice that a lot of brands out there, sometimes they'll change their packaging quite dramatically, and that means the product isn't selling. We will go through a couple of tiny little brand changes along the way just to modernize it and clean it up. But the original VITHIT, the way it is really sells extremely well all across the globe. So you don't touch that. So then you've got your base. You don't want to mess with your base, but then you want to create some satellites outside that to try and help with the base. So what we did was we kind of looked at it and say, okay, through your journey in your average Tesco, when you walk in, you see on the left-hand side, there's usually the fridges, and they'll be full of VITHIT and etc. So that's where somebody doing their shopping in the day will see VITHIT. But then where else they see VITHIT? You kind of walk through the aisles, you don't see it, and then you get to the back of the store and you got a 4-pack of VITHIT and you might see it on the ground there. So we're kind of saying, okay, how do we influence those other positions? So that's one of the thoughts that we have. And so we created a kids product, so then you're in the cold section. So then we also created a can, which is kind of more of a food service thing. But again, it's a similar thought process. In your daily walk, if you're going into a cafe where you might not see VITHIT, we want to see VITHIT can. So that's kind of, we decided that. So it's basically trying to catch people on their daily journeys. But another thing then we started thinking of was, how do you consume VITHIT in your day? So mainly we're a lunch drink. You'll have it with your sandwich, you'll have a VITHIT. You're not taking in the extra sugar, you're not taking the extra calories. Job done. Fantastic. Tastes better than water. That's exactly, and you're getting all the vitamins. So that's job done. But are you taking VITHIT in the morning? Chances are you're not. So we started working a bit probably 3 years ago on an effervescence product, which is just in a pouch, and you rip the top off, throw it in a glass of water, knock it back. And that's a morning kind of consumption. So you'd be taking that for energy in the morning. It's got 90 milligrams of green tea, which doesn't give you that real spike the coffee does. It kind of gives you a nice slow energy. And then we've got a product called the Great Defender, which keeps away colds and flus. We've got zinc and vitamin C in there, which is a great product. And then we've got a hydration station, which will basically just do it does what it says in the tin. It'll hydrate you for the day or before or after sports. So we're kind of looking at area as well now and seeing if we can expand flavors in that too.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I actually didn't think of that at all, about just been seeing more around the store. That's a really interesting point. But and how successful have the new products been?
Yeah, the effervescents have been really successful. We got a distributor in Ireland who is they go into pharmacies every day. So again, you know, a Vivid consumer might not be in a Tesco or a cafe in the day. They might pop into a pharmacy, whatever, to get their medicine once every month or something like that. So we are selling through that channel and it's been really successful. So we're doing well with that. And then also that's an easier product to sell online. Because it's a pack of about this size and it goes through your letterbox. It's designed it can fit through your letterbox. It's much lighter, so it costs less and better for the environment to be sending, you know, heavy products across the globe. So that's really helped as well. So that's kind of the thought process in that. So yeah.
Have you noticed a change in how people are buying the product in store versus like an online subscription?
There is more online now because less people are in work every day because of since COVID, you know, people are taking 1 or 2 days working from home. So that has changed buying habits. So the urban stores are less busy during the week and the suburban stores are busier. So I think people are walking around less. Like if you go into town on a Monday through to Friday, the odd day it'll be really busy, whereas back 10 years ago it'd be busy every day. And so I don't know, the government are going to have to figure that bit out because there's less people out and about consuming, you know, they're buying stuff to take home. So the take home business has definitely gotten bigger. You know, 4-packs are selling more. So we have fitted 4-packs, they're selling more, and online is selling more. So people are spending more time at home, which there's a whole other side to that, in that I think socially it's a bad idea for people to be at home. I understand why people want to be at home because they've less time to be traveling, all that kind of stuff, and that's great. But socially, for young people, spending a lot more time online, and then there's another reason why they can stay at home. People are not engaging as much, and I think that's a bit troublesome for the world, to be honest.
So, Gary, we heard you say on a previous podcast that like the reason smaller brands stand a chance is because bigger corporations kind of lose focus, or somebody starts something, the corporation gets sacked, or whatever the case may be. How do you ensure that this doesn't happen to VITHIT as it keeps growing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just, I suppose, a really good CEO won't let that happen. Like our CEO, Troy, keeps an eye on the figures almost on a daily basis. That's his kind of MO. So he's watching figures all the time. I'm about to have a chat now in the next hour or so with our Irish distributors, and we'll be watching their figures on a monthly basis. And the same thing with our guys in obviously the UK. We get the figures that monthly. And then, you know, Holland, Belgium, all those kind of things. We meet up with distributors, meeting up with my Dutch distributor tomorrow online. So you're constantly looking at each one. And sometimes, yeah, things do, of course, fall through the cracks. But bigger doesn't always mean better. So like if we had 60 people working, you know, you might have 1 or 2 people just not pulling their weight. Whereas I suppose the answer is really ownership. If something is falling down, we know exactly who to point the finger at in our company. And so, you know, nobody wants to be the tall poppy if they're failing, right? So if there's something going wrong, we'll be able to say, well, hang on, that's your section. Why is that going wrong? And let's find out. So that person will, let's say Belgium are having a problem. I'll be able to go to Ashling and say, what's wrong with Belgium? She'll phone them up and say, what's wrong here, guys? You know, your monthly sales have gone down. And they'll say, well, you know, we've lost a retailer. And we say, why'd you lose them? Let's get them back, that kind of stuff. So it's still quite tight. You know, even though we're in 18 countries, we're probably only in 12 of them with real kind of gusto and growing. The others are kind of just, they're latent enough. But the real important ones are, there's probably 12 of them, and we keep an eye on them pretty tightly.
Have you ever been tempted to take outside funding in? I know you've never taken outside funding to speed up growth.
It's a completely different business model. We're so long doing what we're doing. I have thought about it, but I haven't been tempted so far. It would want to be somebody to come in and say, yes. I mean, let's say it's a large international drinks company. I say, look, we've seen what you can do in the UK, with your rate of sale. We can get you into those 45,000 stores. Let's partner up and we'll get you in there. Something like that would make a lot of sense. It hasn't happened yet. Not to say that it won't happen. But yeah, I mean, if somebody can get us into more places, and there's certain performances put in, I mean, yeah, I'd be interested in that.
So it's not just pure funding. You want some value
Oh no,
with the funding as well. Yeah.
yeah, we don't really want funding actually. We don't need it. So if someone was to come along and say, "Listen, we'll give you X amount of money," there's no use for us currently because we're not in need of funding. And yes, to take your point, if you take in a few million and you fire it at a certain country, you could, but that's a different business model than us. Like we are profitable and we grow at 18% ish a year. And that's kind of our business model. And we keep that like that. Other guys want to spend money first and grow later. But there's a lot of graveyards with brands who have done that. So it's kind of hit and hope really with those guys. Like, there's a good few brands in the UK who've come along the last 8 to 10 years that have shot up like rockets and just died because they didn't have sustainable businesses. So I kind of don't want to do that either. We don't want to spend before we actually can make a profit.
Yeah, and as you said, if it's not broken, why try and fix it?
Yeah.
And so if you're at 45 million bottles per year sales now, I've heard you say that you want to get VITHIT to scale to 100 million bottles a year. What are going to be the fundamentals to get into that?
I mean, our real focus is the UK because we have such a high rate of sale in those 10-odd thousand stores. We know with pretty good accuracy that if we can get into the 45,000 stores, we can, 4x that, 5x it probably. So that's a pretty short thing. Then you've got other markets here. The Middle East is starting to turn around now. It's been a while. It's actually our worst market, even though I'm living here. Because we didn't have good distribution for ages. We got a good distributor now, and we're kind of learning what to do. It was slightly different to the markets that we're used to, so that took a while. Embarrassingly so, I'm here for 4 years, and things have been failing. I'm losing my touch.
Too much paddle and sunbathing.
Exactly, too much fun. I'm losing my touch. I'm also getting too old for this. But yeah, there's lots of successes to be had in other countries. UK, this region here is really popping. I was saying earlier before we started that Dubai, where I live, it's really changed. The idea of Dubai, where it was kind of like a Vegas for the world back 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it's really changed now. The people are coming here to live forever and have no interest in going home. And it's kind of like, I always say it's kind of like where I live, it's kind of like a European city now with guaranteed sunshine. It's a bit too hot now. It's a place where there's a lot of Europeans here now, and there's 90% non-Emiratis are now living here. And there's a real cultural melting pot. Like I have friends from South Africa, Australia, UAE, everywhere, Dutch, a lot. So it's a really interesting place to live, but it's growing really fast. And I kind of think of it like, it's almost like the new America. So when I was young, people used to want to go to Florida and New York on their holidays. Now in the winter, they're coming to Dubai for the Christmas holidays, and it's really changed. So yeah, this is a really fast growing area. There's loads of opportunities here. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Great. And another topical subject at the moment is AI. How do you think AI can help VITHIT now and in the future, and how much thought are you putting into it?
Not a lot. I might ask AI how it can help my business.
We'll ask ChatGPT now and see what he says.
Yeah, do you know what? Like, because we're not a SaaS business or we're not technically based, how can AI help? Obviously, there are information systems that AI can tell you. And there are people contacting me at the moment saying, look, we can tell you where your customers are on a daily basis, et cetera, et cetera. But they haven't really nailed that part yet, the consumer part of it yet. So at the moment, it's still a business where we are creating something, putting it on a shelf, and people are going to that shelf to buy it. AI at the moment isn't influencing people yet to choose my product over something else. The internet is, that's why we spend a lot of our time on Instagram. We do most of our marketing on Instagram. But as an influencing thing, if you're to ask me, has AI influenced our business? Not yet. And that's probably not the answer you wanted to hear.
No.
It's the truth so far.
Yeah. So, Gary, we mentioned about the sugar and the obesity, and obviously the main cause of obesity is sugar. And I think sugar addiction is something that isn't talked about enough. And I know you mentioned that you used to have a sugar addiction. You used to have a packet of Jaffa cakes.
Yeah,
I
did.
For someone like me, I'm very conscious. I'm trying to come off as much the amount of sugar I have. Any tips?
I do have tips. First one is take your time. Don't try and become a non-sugar addict overnight. It literally takes time. You can't just come off a cliff. So years ago, and this is where my nutrition bit. So I used to read up a lot about nutrition because I wanted to be in this business, in the future. This is back in like 1995 when I was kind of reading all about it. And I came across chromium. And so chromium picolinate is a tiny mineral which is in shellfish, and it actually maintains your insulin levels. So what happens is, if you notice, older people, grannies and granddads, will always eat a lot more sweets and milk and like milk trays and all that kind of stuff than your average person. And why is that? And it's because as you get older, your insulin levels drop. So if you can maintain your insulin levels by taking something like chromium, it really helps. So no, we don't have chromium well, actually we do have it in lean green, but it's a very handy mineral. It's not a lot is known about it. But basically how this story came about was about, I should say it was 25, 27 years ago. My mum was meeting me for lunch, and I opened the door of her car and I looked in, and she had a packet of wine gums and the packet of cola bottles in the car. And I'm like, what's that? And she says, oh, I just love them. And I said, no, you don't just love them, you're addicted. And she was like, what are you talking about? I'm not addicted. And I said, listen, I'm going to get you something that you take this every day, and within 3 weeks, you won't be eating those things in the car because you won't have that need. She's like, don't be ridiculous. Anyway, about a month later, I said, take this every day. About a month later, she phoned me up. She goes, you're not going to believe it. She said, I haven't touched those sweets in the car for about 2 weeks. So what people think is their brain tells them that, let's say, if your addiction is, or if you really like Maltesers, right? Your brain is telling you like Maltesers. You're not addicted. You like it. So every day you're going to go, I'll just have my little treat of Maltesers. That's your body going, we need sugar. Give us sugar in whatever form that is. Could be a Kit Kat, Maltesers, whatever it is. A sugary drink, Coca-Cola. I see people drinking that all the time. Excuse me. So what actually that sugar addiction is your brain going, you really like this, just have it every day. And so we gave this chromium to my mum. Her insulin levels maintained the level they should have been at, and she got off her major addiction for sugar. But then people say to me, oh, but I don't want to get off my sugar. I really enjoy it. And I go, see, you're not never going to like sugar again. It'll just stop that real need to have it. Yeah. So something like chromium picolinate is fantastic. I also will take, as natural I can, a protein drink every night. So if I'm craving sugar, which I regularly do, I will be in the house. I will go and get myself a protein drink, which I just had one earlier, just before I got on this. And that kind of kills that sugar craving. And then also, I will try an apple with peanut butter. So you get kind of the fruit, and you'll also get the protein out of peanut butter. Because an apple doesn't satiate you. It doesn't sort out your hunger cravings. But an apple, which gives you the sweetness, plus a bit of peanut butter, which got protein in it, will actually cut out a lot of cravings. So there's a couple of tricks for you.
Yeah, that's really fun.
Right on the wall, yeah.
Will we go on to the short questions?
Yeah, questions for the road.
Gary, so the first one is, you say to do one thing a day that scares you. What's the last thing you did that scared you the most in the last year or so?
I don't do too many things that scare me anymore. I've got too old and comfortable. But it is definitely a brilliant motivator for when you're young and when you're trying to get to where I feel I am. So, there's a lot of people out there working who get to a successful level but never actually enjoy it, and they just keep going. I'm not that guy. I'm at a stage in my business life where I'm actually enjoying where I am. So I don't have to do things that scare me every day. But I used to have to do things that scared me for the first probably 17 odd years. And that would mean making the phone call that you don't want to make, giving bad news to the person you don't want to give bad news to. I suppose I would say if there's someone in your company that doesn't suit the culture, you're going to have to make that call sooner rather than later, because if you let that thing fester and the person isn't suited to the culture of your company, things are just going to get ugly, and more than one person will be unhappy. Or it could be calling into a store, or making a phone call to a distributor and trying to hassle them, this, that, and the other. And things don't really scare me any longer, because when I started, I was scared of going into stores. I really didn't want to go into stores. I was like, Jesus, this is so embarrassing, having to go in and knock on the door and ask if I had to buy my stuff. It was just a mindset. And once I had done it a few times, I ended up loving it. So I stopped being scared by them, and my business became successful off the back of that. So I suppose it's probably not the answer that you probably want to hear, because, yes, you should push yourself all the time. But I've got to a stage where I expect other people in my company to push themselves and to do things that scare them. So I kind of maybe cracked a bit that way a bit.
Exactly. You've been doing it for well over 25
Yeah.
years, so you've had enough of it.
Yeah. No more being scared.
Still great advice. If you had, Gary, if you had to pick 3 of the most critical things, you've probably touched them on them already, that's helped VITHIT become one of the top selling drink brands in the UK and Ireland and across your other markets, what would those 3 things be?
3 things for the products that make it successful, or 3 things for a businessman
That have made it successful, yeah.
Well, the main thing is your product. I mean, I did say this, so forgive me for repeating myself, is the product has to look great. It could be the most amazing product inside. Like 25 years ago, VITHIT was the very same product inside as it is today and didn't sell a bottle. Nobody wanted it. It was throwing dust. So your product has to look incredible. And I suppose if you go further into that, people, and one of the things I do have is, like, I'm terrible at maths, but I have an eye. So I can tell with probably 99% accuracy if I see a brand coming out of the States, I will know whether it's going to be here in 3 or 4 years or not. So that is an eye that I have for branding and for brands. And I know if I can see something, I know instantly if it's going to be successful, if it looks good. Now, when you open the can or the bottle or the product, if it tastes awful, then it's not going to succeed. But packaging it's everything to start with. And if your packaging isn't incredible, and I get this all the time, there are people who are really good at business and they're really good with their figures and they're really good at sales. And they come to me and they go, what do you think? And I say, your brand looks horrendous. It looks awful. You need to kill your branding person and go completely 360 or this will not succeed. A lot of the time they don't take my advice, but it's one of the things that I'm usually pretty right in. So that's the branding side of it. Other things are, if you can't get your product on the shelf, there's no point in, you can have the greatest brand in the world, but you can't get it on the shelf. So you've got to get a really good distributor. It's very, very hard to get good distributors in our business. And even then, when you get a really good distributor, they might have a few sales reps who are busy selling Red Bull or Lucozade and making all their commission on that. And they might not really want to bother to us introducing a brand new product called VITHIT. So that's the other thing. You've got to have really good distribution. The last thing, like, this kind of goes for all businesses, is I think you need to have a really good competitive spirit. Like, it really pisses me off when I go into a store and I see my competitors on the shelf anywhere in the world that I'm VITHIT isn't on stuff. And I think competition and a competitive nature is essential if you are going to succeed in business, because you've got to want to get up in the morning ahead of the other guy. You've got to want to get your product on the shelf. You've got to sacrifice hours. It's like sports. If any of you guys ever played sports, you're obviously into golf. I was into rugby. And I was asked once, I was giving a chat of rugby, and one of the guys said, how does it feel when you're up against, let's say, other big brands? And I say, it's exactly how you feel when you're in a Leinster Cup final, you're up against an opposition player, you want to smash them. And I said, that's exactly what I want to do to the opposition brands. It's the same thought. You've got to want to take the other guys down. And that's a competitive spirit that you need to have as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things, isn't it? As a kid, you have to be playing some sort of sport to build that competitive edge and even the work ethic. And it's just so important, isn't it?
Listen, and you've probably heard me say it on the podcast, it's so important for kids to play team sports, even if you're bad at it, because the kids going to be losing the most are the kids that will win the most in the long run, because we've costed our kids way too much about not being able to lose. I play my 7-year-old in Uno and I try and kick her ass every time and she's got used to losing and it pisses her off. But we go head to head in Uno a lot of nights. And
the ultimate competitor.
Yeah, but it makes them more rounded human beings at an earlier age. You've got to know how to lose. It's terrible seeing your kid lose and cry, and we all have hearts, and it's awful seeing your kids being upset. But guess what? If they lose this week and then, they're upset, after a while, they'll get used to it. They'll just be like, it's a loss, brush it off. And that was, I think, where my resilience came from, is that whenever I was losing, it didn't really matter because I was lost all the time in sports. I got dropped, I got injured, you don't get picked for the right teams. You're just losing the whole time. And it's mini traumas when you're a kid of, I lost. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I got dropped. Oh my God, what are people going to think? Then, you take that into real life and you're losing more often than not. you just need to be used to it.
I suppose we might have already touched on this, but the next one was, what one piece of advice would you give to your kids about business, health, or life? But you can only choose one of them.
Business, health, or life.
One piece of advice, you can only choose one of them.
Well, I disagree with this whole thing of do one thing that you love, right? I actually disagree with it. And this is contrary to what a lot of people are saying on social media. I would be saying, don't do what you love, do what you're good at. If you started in any industry today and you're really good at it, nobody loves their boss. Nobody really wants to hug their boss every day. Nobody is sitting on a train in misery wet Ireland, at 9 to 20 years of age, doing an apprenticeship. Can't wait to get into work, right? You can like your job, but this whole thing of love your job, go for your passion. I would say work at what you're good at for 10 years, get to the top of your tree, and then on your holidays, you can afford to do what you love to do. And enough time you can afford to do what you love to do. And you can provide for your family and watch them doing what they love to do. I think, we underestimate being a provider. Being a provider for me is the most important job I have. And for both my daughter and my son, I would be teaching them, go hard at things that you're good at. And you're supposed to work and you're supposed to go through pain as a young person, anguish, hate my boss, I don't want to work here, got to get past this guy in the office, I got to get to a certain stage, competitive nature, do all that stuff. And then, from 20 to 30, you've done the hard yards. And by 35, you're hopefully at the top of the tree or close to it. And then you can start to enjoy the spoils. I think this thing of, just do what you love, go hug a tree. Nobody ever made it in life and business out of hugging a tree. So that would be my advice. And it's probably contrary to what a lot of people are saying. But I think people sell that line of bullshit for internet hits. And I actually don't think, I don't think it's real. And so I'd be telling my kids to do that and enjoy your weekends, be able to afford to do great things on a weekend and long weekends and jump on a flight to Paris when you're enough pocket money saved, or, when you're 32 or whatever, 25 or whatever. Work hard for the first 10 years. It's not supposed to be easy from the age of 20 to 30. It wasn't easy for me. I don't think it's going to be easy for anybody.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And social media.
I don't mean to be miserable in that, but it's not supposed to be.
That's reality.
It's not supposed to be. It is reality. It's not supposed to be all roses. And the people who are telling you, leave your job, go to Bali, they're influencers who are making money off you going to Bali and following them. And not a lot of people can be influencers. It's not a great life. It's a great life for someone who has 5 million followers. They can do what they want, but to get to that stage is very, very hard. So yeah, I'm a bit of a curmudgeon with that idea.
You're the product in those cases. So, Gary, you've lived in Dubai for the last few years. What's the biggest lesson you've learned from living in Dubai?
The biggest lesson from living in Dubai, my social life is better here, which I never thought would be the case. And it's probably not a lesson. I might think some of this more related to business, but everybody here, even though Ireland is the land of 1,000 welcomes, I find that when you get your tribe and your group of friends, whether you got them in school or in college or in kindergarten or wherever you got them in Ireland, we have long-term friends, which is amazing. I can get in a flight at any time over the next 20 years and come to Ireland and meet my friends for pints whenever I want. And that's brilliant. Ireland's great for that. But when I moved here, I didn't know one person. And I have breakfast with 5 to 10 people every morning here down at the surf cafe down the road from me. And they're all my friends now. And my social, I was leaving Ireland going, my social life's never going to be the same. It isn't, but it's completely different. So in Ireland, I'd be meeting my friends once every 3 to 5 weeks for, pints in O'Brien's and Lisa Street, which I love. To this day, I love doing that. But here, I'm meeting my friends before work every morning after I drop the kids to school. And it's totally different lifestyle. And I think the reason why that has happened is because nobody is from here. So everybody is making a huge effort to meet friends and to connect. And it's a real human thing. Certainly for me, I don't want to live in paradise if I don't have, people. Because your family are one thing, and you go out for nice dinners and whatever with your home or here. But actually, I like to have something outside that, to have friends you can chat to and hang out with. And we do that every morning. Myself and my wife will pop down to meet friends almost every morning. And that is the benefit of this place that I never thought I would get. Have I learned anything else here? I'm not sure. Might have to do that in another podcast. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. There we go, Al. We already have the invite for the next time.
You do, yeah.
Yeah, when you hit 100 million bottles.
Yeah, and we hit a certain amount of followers too. So, Gary, you said on a previous podcast it was great chatting to other entrepreneurs at the EY event in Japan, and that you'd similar sort of issues. Could you maybe talk to us about the common problems facing entrepreneurs at the moment?
Yeah, it's kind of being the only guy in your room. I mean, as an entrepreneur, most people will start with one or two guys, and sharing your everyday issues. You don't really do it. Certainly, as an Irish guy, you kind of keep it to yourself. Like, if I think back on when I was going through my hardship, nobody, not one of my friends, knew the hardship. It's stupid. You know, you should share. I share things a lot more now. We're always saying no, and the shared is problem solved. Anybody, I was just, I don't know, not sure. It wasn't shame. It was just, I'm going to pull out this and tell everybody how bad it was, which is what I did. Now I share it. So I think having like-minded people back in the Worcester room, and you're talking about like-minded issues. Those issues are, I mean, there's nothing specific. It's just, you know, the one thing which is really unusual is I would never meet a guy and say, what's your turnover? What's your EBITDA and bottom line profit? But actually, everyone did this on this trip, and it was like, you know, it was like saying good morning, would you like a cup of tea? You know, and it's the first thing you ask someone, you go, so who are you? And what do you do? Oh, yeah, I know VITHIT. What do you do? Oh, I sell electrical engineering parts for people in China or whatever. And they said, oh, what's your turnover? And weird. It was a completely different conversation starter than you'd ever have. And then that'd be it for business. You wouldn't talk about business again, but you just have something in common. It's like a bunch of rugby players meeting up or a bunch of hurling players meeting up. You kind of have some action, and then you talk about other stuff.
So do you wish you were part of a group like that earlier in your career?
No, because I wouldn't have been able to have the time. Would it be, you know, would have just me from day-to-day job. The reason why it's so popular is because the alumni who've been there have already made it. There's about 100 of them that go every year. They put the time aside. And actually, one of the guys, a well-known Irish businessman, kind of stood up last week when we were all sitting there, and he basically said the reason why he comes back is to get re-energized by other people. And I definitely got re-energized by it. Because, like I said, I'm sitting on my own, working in the drinks industry, selling drinks to people. It's all drinks, drinks, drinks. And you meet other younger people, like Anya from the Smooth Company. I don't know if you've seen her. She's kind of like a TikTok sensation.
Yeah,
And she has this smooth stick thing. And like the energy out of that girl is just off the charts. And it's funny because she was going through an airport and she has a smooth stick cover on her phone, a smooth stick cover on the bag, smooth stick on her jacket, smooth stick on her passport holder. And I was just like, Jesus, I'm in the halfpenny place when it comes to branding, you know. And this is just these kind of people, these little things you pick up from younger people that I wouldn't even think of. And then you get the older sages who are telling you about how to do things and what they do and just make decisions fast and all that kind of stuff. So no, it was great.
Well, Gary, thank you very much. That was unbelievable. So many lessons there and some great stories. We really appreciate. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
I have one more, and it's probably the most important question I'll ask you.
Mhm.
What's the favorite flavor?
That's like asking me what's my favorite chocolate. I can't tell you.
Well, if the gun was to the head, which one would you go for?
Probably the pink one, Immunity. That was kind of a bit of a mistake almost. I basically just said to the taste technologist, I said, look, give me an ingredient that I've never heard of and throw it into something that I have heard of. And that ingredient, I'm pretty sure we were the first ones to use it between, as far as I know, in Europe is yuzu, and now yuzu is in a lot of products. It's kind of like an ugly lemon, but so Immunity, I think, is grapefruit and yuzu. I think we first came out with it about 10 or 11 years ago, and it's just a really good flavor. And so, yeah, I just ran with it. We just came through and I was like, oh my God, what is that? I was like, yuzu. And I said, what's yuzu? And I had to Google it. And I found out that it looked like a lemon. So that's probably the one that I would go for if I was pushed.
Incredible. Gary, thanks a million. And we'll give Aisling a shout out for giving you the heads up. So thanks a million